In our fast-paced and demanding world, a lot of us surely feel a bit burnt out by the incessant repetition of work, and home. Not only that, but the world feels a little more fucked than it did a decade ago. A cost of living crisis looms over Europe and North America, interest rates rising on mortgages, as well as an increase in energy prices, rent, food, and essentials. It's forced many of us into an existential rut. Well, it needn't be. Or rather, it shouldn't be. What we need is a reintroduction to our third place. In this video, I'll talk about the sociological concept of a third place, what it is, the significance of it, where it's gone, and finally how we can get it back. So, first, the third place is a term coined by sociologist Ray Oldenburg and refers to places where people spend time between home and work. They are locations where we should be able to exchange ideas, have a good time, and build relationships. Think of your local pub, a coffee shop, a library, youth centre, churches, or gyms. Essentially, these are places where you meet with the rest of your community, not necessarily people you would normally interact with and chat. The significant thing about these third places is that they are usually spaces where social classes are leveled out. A rich citizen from one part of the neighborhood drinks in a pub with a poorer citizen from another part of the neighborhood, and in this shared space they are seen as equal. They will thrive according to their own will or inspire conversation through their own intellect. A broader range of ideas and discussions can be had that would challenge or broaden one or another's worldview. It's a place to build empathy, connections, and community. They are often referred to as the living room of society, a mixing pot of people from different backgrounds that rewards finding similarities with one another. So, what is the significance of the third place and where have they gone? The inspiration to make this video was in fact inspired by this chart. In this chart of what people have valued over the years, there has been a severe decrease in collective value for the community. In fact, money is the only thing that has increased in collective value. And I suspect that one of the key reasons for this decline of collective value in community is the steady diminishment of third places. To summarize, the significance of the third place is essentially that: spaces for community building. They are our places that aren't our homes or our workplaces. On an individual level, they are places where essentially we can thrive, socially and intellectually. They are a key component in sharpening our personas and our individual identities. On a societal level, they are spaces where social cohesion is born, retained, and evolved. They are places where citizens of a community are able to discuss developments within the community and spaces to organize as a collective if need be. We need them to aid in the compartmentalization of our lives. Our homes are our intimate spaces. Our work is where we exercise a restrained professionalism, and the third place is where we can flourish alongside others. Essentially, Carrie L. Cooper, a professor of organizational psychology, states, "These venues and spaces provide people with an imperceptible feeling of being socially connected and part of a community that are quite important for being productive and imaginative." Kathy Giuffre, a professor at Colorado College, further states that a real third place can also contain an element of casual social aid. Not only that, but historically they have been essential. The cafes in Paris were where the French Revolution was planned. British pubs have been spaces where everything from the designs of the first British railways were drawn up to the organisation of the poll tax strikes in the Thatcher years. And it was in a fraternity bar where John Nash devised game theory that would reinvent politics and economics to this day. Third places are the liminal space between our intimate expression of ourselves, our professional diligence, and our creative flourishing. They are the spaces where we can say aloud the ideas we think alone and use the tool of informal feedback to refine and rework ideas collectively. I'm sure some of you are watching at home confused. Why am I lamenting the demise of the third place when they are still about? Well, sadly, not as much. And oftentimes these spaces are disproportionately more common in wealthy neighborhoods than in poorer neighborhoods, more common in cities rather than suburbs, and more commonly targeted to younger people rather than older people. The issue with these facts is multi-pronged. Firstly, it can be argued to some extent that these spaces are more necessary in poorer neighbourhoods than they are in wealthier neighbourhoods. Not like the latter shouldn't have any, but rather the former benefits from third places for spaces for community building. You see, third places and the social cohesion that follows correlates with a drop in crime in the area. Essentially, the more people you meet, the more you emphasize with one another, the less likely you are to commit crimes against one another. When one is isolated in their house, not knowing their neighbours, they feel less obliged to watch out for their neighbour and emphasize less with the larger community. To the second point of third places being more prevalent in cities and not suburbs, a similar argument follows. Communities in cities aren't as localized as they are in suburbs. You could work in a bar in a city and see a different group of people come in all the time. Sure, they serve as a spot to hang out and mingle, make new friends, etc., which are all important, but if you work in a local pub or cafe, you will often see more and more of the same people frequenting the establishment, which greatly aids localized community building that is more essential for people living in suburbs. And finally, on the last point, whilst young people absolutely should have third places and are essential for their growing minds, they shouldn't be favoured at the expense of a third place for the elderly. There is a silent epidemic of chronic loneliness amongst the elderly in the Western world. Studies have shown that social isolation significantly increases a person's risk of premature death from all causes, a risk that rivals smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. Not only that, but social isolation was associated with about a 50% increased risk of dementia. A third place is quite literally a medical necessity for the elderly in the developed world, and there is a drastic shortage of third places for the elderly. And of course, all these problems are compounded with a global cost of living crisis, meaning for the places that are left, many people don't have the means to afford to go out. So where have they gone and why? And what are the implications of them going? Well, one big factor that recently closed tens, if not hundreds of thousands of third places globally was the COVID-19 pandemic. Not only did the pandemic decimate social third places, but also for many, the space between work and home immediately collapsed into one another. Meaning in some respects, some of us lost 2 spaces in total. Apart from COVID, another issue has been funding. Say there is an empty space in a residential community area. What would make more money? More houses, a factory, another chain restaurant, or a social space for people to come together? The former 3, of course. In growth-driven capitalism, everything must expand, but only for profit. Collectively, we've embraced monopolization. Starbucks instead of independent coffee shops. In the UK, local quirky pubs have been replaced by Wetherspoons. Libraries knocked down for either luxury apartments or malls. Commercialization has decimated the third space. The third space is now commodified, sanitized, and weirdly alienating. Which brings me on to my next point. The decline of the third place directly benefits the interests of the powerful. A lack of third places is an apt opportunity to keep people more socially isolated. More social isolation means less chance of people organizing, which means more people stay at home watching the news that they vet and utilize as mouthpieces for their agenda, which in turn means more people are atomized, angered, and distrustful of their neighbor. All of these outcomes directly benefit the interests of the powerful elite, who have a vested interest in keeping people separated as much as possible. Additionally, these third places have migrated to the online realm. Kids and adolescents nowadays are more likely to form communities online than they are in real life. With a plethora of apps at their fingertips, they can find people that harbor the exact same niche interests that they do. There's no need for real-world relationships when you can find people that agree with you 100%. The implications of this are profound. Echo chambers are cemented. Normally you would mingle in a local pub and find people with different opinions to you. You would argue it out in person without carefully crafted tweets and Reddit comments. Just humanely arguing it out, and imperceptibly you would empathize and begin to understand their argument. Doesn't mean you'd agree on it, you'd come out understanding the other point of view, but you wouldn't be vilifying them as the reincarnation of Satan. Those people with different beliefs were human and deserved respect. On the far extreme of it, you have people like incels, jihadists, and right-wing terrorists, whose malignant ideas go unchecked on forums, validated by other socially isolated individuals, growing more and more extreme, unchecked, and without the real-world pushback that is so often needed to correct people in the depths of their intellectual darkness. Now, with the introduction of AI, ChatGPT that can mimic human conversation, it appears we will only drift further away from a brick-and-mortar third place and into the virtual realm in the generations to come. And the implications of this will be terrifying. Social isolation will cause more and more premature deaths. Cemented echo chambers will cause more atomization and divisions within society. Political and social discourse will arrive at a standstill and grow more and more extreme, further and further away from a reasonable middle ground. Compounding all of this will be the fact that corporations, the financial terrorists that own our countries, will employ their political pawns to rescind workers' rights, human rights, and culture. The landscape will be a drab carbon copy of one another, devoid of any character. No one will mingle, no one will organize, and no one will fight back. Isolated, they will use TV and media to comfort and control the masses, shaping them into the obedient consumers, slowly boiling the pot that kills the frog. Prices will go up, wages will go down, there'll be no pushback except for a few meaningless tweets, Facebook posts, and petitions that will be swiftly ignored. Essentially, the complete erosion of the third place is the erosion of our social cohesion and our empathy and understanding of one another. It's the erosion of the leveling out of social classes that serves as a fresh reminder that we are all human in this together. But how can we get them back? I don't want to end my video on such a downer, so there are solutions. Ultimately, it boils down to urban planning. We all need to embrace a sense of communalism. We can't fix the world's problems, but we can fix the ones on our doorstep. You can pressure your local councillors. After all, they rely on your votes. Remind them who they work for. Ask them to directly address the issue of the lack of third places. Remind them the effects it has on everything, from reducing crime and strengthening community bonds to improving mental and physical health, all of which cost millions per year to tackle. Remind them of the importance of youth clubs for spaces where teenagers can be safe, create and innovate, which will help keep them off the streets. Skate parks, pubs, libraries, sports and well-being centres are all essential social utilities that have far-reaching benefits. The power we all have is our ability and right to vote. We enact the change we want by collectively vetting our councillors, MPs, congressmen and women. You get the idea. Often the change starts with you, organising within your street. The local affects the national. Why should we live in drab social conditions when we can reimagine something more? They often want you to forget it, but it's you and your community that has the power. Care for your community and help it flourish and reap the rewards of social cohesion. And don't let third places be taken from you. They aren't just places to hang out, they're essential to the health of your community. Thank you for watching. If you like what I do, please like, share and subscribe this video. If you really like what I do, then please consider subscribing to my Patreon or buying me a coffee. All support is appreciated. Visit my website for all the show notes of this episode, and until next time, peace.